The wind clawed at my window all night long. It wandered the fields and howled like a hungry beast. An endless song weaved from all sorts of voices, shrill, gentle, sneery, twined in the air. They were shouting and laughing and arguing about something. Someone was running through the snow while casting long shadows that would occasionally creep close to my bed. Our house had a mind of its own, the creaky old mind of a building that had seen a lot in its days and was seemingly trying to share its wisdom with the inhabitants. The lonely house faced the forest, and the dark green thicket gazed back with its hollow eyes, rustling, whizzing, swaying back and forth. One could come out and stand at the edge of the forest to reassure themselves. There was nobody behind the crooked trees. Fuzzy silhouettes swaying in the wind couldn't possibly do any harm. It's just a play of light and shadow. Just a play. This is the starting monologue of the visual novel Tiny Bunny. It's a game lovingly crafted and illustrated to paint the world of the cold Serbian forest in the 1990s. It was made in Ren'Py, a visual novel engine that normally results in games that look like this, or this, or this, and its ubiquity as a visual novel engine has turned it into its own entire aesthetic. Games like Doki Doki Literature Club and others have used that commonness to break those assumed rules, but when it comes to Tiny Bunny, you might not be able to tell this was a Ren'Py game at first. It features detailed and tailored illustrations for every single moment of the story, taking years and years to make, and is still to this day not yet completed. The story follows us in the eyes of Anton, a boy brand new to an isolated village in Serbia after fleeing their home for reasons he doesn't seem to know. Your family arrives on the cusp of a harsh winter, and at the same time has a disappearance, a child named Vova, one that went to the very same school that you're going to tomorrow. The first chapter of the game sees Anton wrestling with paranoia. Their new home is one cut off from the rest of the village and surrounded by an ocean of snow and trees. While it exists in a clearing, this home feels more like a blemish on the face of the forest than any sign of civilization, one that would be nothing more than a pile of wood and snow a few decades from now. As stranger and stranger things start to happen, it feels more like you're covering your head with a blanket than truly bracing against anything that wants to come in. For most Ren'Py games, their goal is to paint a world largely with words alone, with music and backgrounds and character sprites and briefly illustrated moments to embellish it, and many games have been able to do just that. For Tiny Bunny, however, there is a very specific feeling the game wants you immersed in, one far better shown and spoken. The fragility of the world we know in the expansive face of nature. Nature exists in games for many reasons, but the most glaring and obvious is that above all else, it's cheap and it's convenient. If you're trying to have a game that somewhat resembles reality and can't justify a thing humans made being there, well, nature is the default. However, the less talked about reason is that nature in video games is just cost and labor effective. You see this a lot in indie games especially. While human-made structures are all specific and varied and detailed in construction and color and layout, nature is repeatable and expandable. Species of all kinds endure in real life by being able to make essentially copies of themselves with slight variations. If you have one tree model, one grass texture, and slightly varied terrain to work with in a game, our brains can go, yep, that's nature, and move on with our day. Even for much higher effort products, a large forest takes magnitudes less effort to create than a reasonable facsimile of a city or town of the same size. For every hyper-detailed mountain and river and deer and tree, its ability to be reused with slight changes is much higher than any city that grew and developed and changed over the course of hundreds of years. This isn't to say that a lot of games haven't put great amounts of effort and care into making lush, varied, and beautiful depictions of nature though. While I'm sure there's 1,000 better examples, one that's always stuck out in my mind is the Tomb Raider reboot from 2013. To say that Tomb Raider has a grounded depiction of nature would be a bold claim, but it's able to use its setting, Yamatai, a fictional mythological island off the coast of Japan, in a way that civilization simply never could be. There are man-made structures, in fact the majority of the game is spent traveling through them, but there is never a doubt in your mind that these are structures within nature and not the other way around. Decay is the word that spirals around your mind looking at any building in this game. The island is protected by a curse of bad weather, one that makes it impossible to leave, and the nature itself seems to regularly rebel against everyone trapped there. Structures collapse under your feet, tree trunk-wide poles fall to a human's body worth of pressure, harsh weather berates every inch of the ground and sky at any moment it can. The only structures that seem to last longer than most are ones that bow their head more to nature than humanity. The ancient kingdom that once occupied the island never vied for more than basic building materials and carving roots through the already existing structure of the island. Things constructed from the same DNA seem to either be accepted or rejected by this living body, either made stable or berated endlessly by harsh weather. Modern technology of any kind, large ships, planes, phones, are regularly cut off and mangled beyond repair. We see attempts at taming this island, taming nature from seemingly every era of civilization, from huts, wooden houses, and gateways to World War II military expeditions. Your ship is just the newest addition of man's hubris to the beast of nature that is Yamatai. Just like the amplified action and dramaticism of the world of Tomb Raider, nature's ever-present claim over us, its endurance and guarantee to reclaim what it lost with every passing second seems to hover over everything. However, while in theme and aesthetic it embodies this all-encompassing decay and regrowth, in terms of gameplay it is the exact opposite. I'm not going to blame a video game for being fun and letting you be the cool protagonist that saves the day, but it occasionally smacks you in the face how perfectly everything seems to be going for you. A lot of words in Venom have been exchanged over the concept of yellow paint in games, the symbol of anything that opts to treat the player like an idiot, showing obvious signals of what you need to be doing, and this game has very much of the same habits. On top of having an eagle vision mechanic similar to Assassin's Creed, the champion game series of holding the player's hand, it also just has yellow paint. This iteration is, instead, a softer silverish rock that you're able to climb up, and arguably makes up around a fifth of the meaningful gameplay in the majority of platforming. This island seems to constantly rebel against you, putting you into near-death scenario after near-death scenario, but never quite enough to actually kill Lara. And again, importantly, this is fine for this game. It is, above all else, a dumb fun action game. Stupid, unrealistic stuff happens constantly. It's not some artistic masterpiece despite being grittier than earlier iterations, and action games are generally not trying to challenge a player's intelligence, and that's fine. The contention with yellow paint seems less like the people who hate it despise the entire concept of pointing things out to the player for a smoother experience, but rather that it's sloppily integrated with the game world instead of being entirely separate or perfectly entwined. It is essentially a user interface that wants to pretend it isn't and fails to do so. Nature, in reality, is not even vaguely created for us, we were created for it. In these action games, in games with traditional game design philosophy, the player is the apex predator. They have achieved mastery over nature itself through the metatext of a good, satisfying story needing to happen. There is a disagreement between the aesthetics of nature and its status as a video game, and the biggest point of tension for design is how easily you can make it for the player to not endlessly notice that fact. Tomb Raider, to solve this issue, opts to borderline torture Lara multiple times in the name of simulating struggle. While you can fight against people, you can only really avoid the weather, run from cliffs collapsing, barely escape the call for you to be swallowed whole by Yamatai, another victim in its eternal rejection of humanity. However, there's never really a doubt in your mind if Lara will survive or not. Of course she will. This is an action game and she is the protagonist. However, increasingly more in the past 20 years, video games have been given the opportunity to not be designed traditionally. Things can be made unapproachable or difficult to figure out in frustrating and unintuitive ways. Statements and artistic vision can be placed above pure entertainment, and with each and every awkward step towards the call of the uncaring forest, every leap towards nature in both aesthetic and design, I find myself enamored. Rain World is, above all, understated. It's a game that was released in 2017, and in the years following, despite mediocre reviews initially from critics, garnered a reputation for its uniqueness and authenticity in gameplay. You play as a creature called a slug cat, one that is whisked away during a storm from its family and finds itself needing to survive in a brand new environment. The main talking point and fascination of the internet with Rain World, and rightfully so, is the game's ecosystem and the disturbingly excessive work that went into making it as authentic as possible. Feeling like a part of something bigger than yourself has seemingly always been an undercurrent of desire for a specific subset of gamers. I remember one of the main talking points of the Call of Duty vs Battlefield debate was exactly this. In Call of Duty, you had curated, dense, stimulating arcade shooter matches that are guaranteed to always give you what you want, a person to shoot and to be shot at. You're never spawned so far away from combat that it feels disparaging to die, the only frustration coming from the fact that you didn't get the kill yourself. Battlefield, in comparison to an experience as consistent as Call of Duty, is honestly a little bit daring. While you can spawn with teammates in your squad, being plopped right into the action, many times this will get you killed instantly or just put you in the middle of nowhere but with a friend this time. Your actual spawn points, at least in the traditional mode of Battlefield 4 for example, are the ones all the way back at your base and any points you currently have captured. There is, by consequence, giant swaths of space that nobody can reliably spawn at. In any given map, there are so many possible angles to attack and to be attacked from that it almost by default makes any battle imbalanced inherently against you. In any given gunfight, you could just be sniped from far away or have another person come from behind you or your side or right in front of you and pick you off entirely out of your control. It directly encourages teamwork because it's necessary to survive in many circumstances. In comparison to Call of Duty, too, the player count for each game is gigantic. 12-player team deathmatch lobbies become 64-player campaigns. Much like Tomb Raider, this feeling is taken and then dramatized. Jets and tanks and armored cars fly and roll through the map, buildings get blown through, the entire map itself will have its centerpiece destroyed or irreversibly changed. Ambient wind sweeps through your speakers while calls come in through the radio. Explosions pepper the distance both visually and audibly. Endless gunshots give every moment a texture of action and danger even without it being presently there for you. Every bullet to graze the air around you feels like a crash through your feeling of safety. Flags captured come with a dramatic flare at a burst of points. This feeling of being small is not inherent so much as it is strived for by the game. Every element seems keenly interested in painting this narrative. It screams to you, you are only one part of something bigger. And yet, this experience, while certainly awash in the feeling of being one of many, is only taken so far as to evoke it. Above all, Battlefield is a shooter game made for general audiences, and that means that above all else, fun comes first. You were never made to feel so weak that you were truly out of control. Rain World does not have any such considerations. It is most certainly awash in this very same feeling of being one part of something bigger, but in almost the opposite direction functionally. In Rain World, you are not granted a bird's eye view. You do not get to see beyond the walls of the screen, your map trapped within the bounds of your area, cutting your sight off from the length and size of your journey ahead or the trodden path of your journey so far. You're not even granted the convenience of an area being filled out for you, the map only filling in what's immediately surrounding you at any given time. Sound design consists primarily of small ambient noises, ones entirely generated by the environment itself. Music can and does embellish the world, but the game is entirely unafraid to have terrifying moments be kept silent, accompanied only by the whirring machines or wind or water around you. No situation, no matter how dire, changes this feeling present in the game. Narrative is given to war and death and suffering and nature. Art is, in some way, a means to give narrative to these ideas and feelings and anything else that's hard to make sense of. Most games, most stories do this exact thing, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. In Tomb Raider, nature is in a constant state of action. The ground cracks, structures fall, animals are eternally on the hunt. You can't take a walk through the forest without encountering 10 deer and getting surrounded by a pack of wolves. This is an island existing in a narrative hyper-reality, just the same as any other action game. It takes the world as we view it and amplifies it until it's hardly recognizable. Rain World, in contrast, does everything in its power to remove itself from narrative. It is perhaps an un-action game. The ecosystem, the point of fixation for most who have heard about Rain World, was not made this way just because it would be really fucking cool to do, though in fairness it is. In the process of creating a difficult game, you are given limits that force you to interact with the world in challenging ways. In general with games, your ability to interact with the world around you is inherently limited, amounting to a moveset, but it is almost always in favor of you. We have had the capabilities to make deeply complex enemy AI for a long time now, but the mode of operation to this day, for the most part, is to keep them simple. This is most often done for the simple reason that these games, at most, only want to simulate the aesthetics of struggle. You have to be able to die in Tomb Raider for stakes to exist, but make no mistake, Lara Croft is not the same species as the things she is killing. You getting killed in Tomb Raider is the equivalent of taking down a monolith. To suit this feeling, the fulfillment of power fantasies, you can't have the player feel outsmarted or outdone by the enemy, not so much that it embarrasses them. The constant stacked odds need to be balanced in your favor somehow, and so when you deal with hordes of enemies, ones that would logically annihilate any protagonist if this truly was a reflection of reality, they need to be made more than simple. In Tomb Raider, once an enemy notices you, they will run to the nearest piece of cover and then they will occasionally pop up to shoot you. That's about it. Any more complex of functions, like getting closer to put pressure on you, is communicated ahead of time through very obvious tells and verbal callouts. Even in games with more fleshed out AI, make no mistake, it is all done in service of you, the player. Nothing in most games challenges your reign as the apex predator. In truth, the only reason we read these NPCs as human is just the skin and clothes they're wearing. By every account, the humans in Tomb Raider are dumber than the wolves. In Rain World, you are as much of an animal as everything else. You can and will be outsmarted, even when outsmarting enemies is your greatest strength. You are given a meager but serviceable moveset, one that feels intentionally but appropriately limited for such a weak creature. And, just as, if not more importantly, the animals in this ecosystem have just as many capabilities as you do. And the real killer is, they know how to actually use it. The AI in this game is designed not to provide you with moving toys to play with, it's to put these animals on your very same level. You will be systematically and efficiently hunted, taken by surprise, harassed and made completely and utterly helpless. You'll be hunted in groups by creatures far, far higher on the food chain, your routes will be cut off. You'll be a sitting duck in both air and sky, and each and every death will feel utterly unceremonious. While respawning in Tomb Raider is a correction of the inevitable timeline, the superhuman getting the happy ending they properly deserve, every time you're reincarnated in Rain World, it is a punishing, yawning reminder of how utterly impossible this journey actually is. If your slug cat was not trapped in the same cycle of reincarnation as every other creature in this place, your journey would end within minutes and nobody would be in the slightest bit surprised. It's a world that makes the act of living feel dissonant, and that tension weighs on you the further and further you go. Even the traditional ways that people improve and fight against unfairly difficult games are stunted. The most common method of fighting back against these worlds is by exploiting the fact that you're a player outside of this universe and know the limits of video games. Often, what happens is that thriving becomes a meta-exploration of a game's limits, deconstructing it as a video game rather than as a world and then exploiting its limited nature. Even in games with complex AI, in most cases, developers use a meta element directly to help the player, consistent animations. This is, in large part, a convenience for the designers, as animation that adapts and changes is much harder to do, but things that let the player know ahead of time that an attack is about to happen allows the player an edge that feels so normalized that it's hardly even noticed. Rain World's second largest fascination online deals directly with this, its procedural animation. While there are consistent movements that happen, the bodies of every creature in the game, including the slug cat, react to the environment and move in real time. While it absolutely feeds into this naturalistic feeling, like these creatures are alive and just as complex as you are, it also helps to remove that comfortable protective barrier that you have in almost every other game. Even behavior in general is made too varied to predictably understand for most players. Not only are there 6+ data trackers applied to any given creature at the same time, the only actual value given specifically to you, the unique to this environment slug cat, is reputation. Depending on how you act around specific creatures, the smarter and more coordinated species will either be more aggressive to you or will outright ignore you out of a tentative peace, and this system is made almost entirely invisible in the game. There are even 6 different personality types applied to some of the species, even further making their actions muddy and unclear, while following a distinct internal logic to everything in the game. It forces you to learn how this environment works, not on the layer of reality above the game, but in the environment itself. You plan contingencies, choose to retreat, use the few things you manage to pick up both literally and metaphorically to scrape your way through the world. And in the pursuit to really de-emphasize your role in all of this environment's utter disinterest in you can actually serve to your benefit. Your goal in most situations in Rain World is to run away or avoid, but it's not like a creature will magically forget your existence the moment you leave the screen or run far enough away. The AI doesn't treat you any differently from any other creature outside of the reputation system, which means that if some other piece of food becomes more convenient for whatever it's hunting, you'll simply be abandoned long enough to leave. You can be fought over by rivaling lizards long enough to break from their grasp, you can lead creatures away with sound or bait, you can even manage to tame some creatures if you feed them enough. Your ability to succeed in and navigate this world relies entirely on your capability to respect its power and your place within it. Your player tendencies, your hubris and aggression and desire to push through things like any other game will be shut down. Not because the game was designed specifically to do that, but because it's the natural result of making an authentic ecosystem. It feels like a logical conclusion stemming from the simple idea of making a game that truly reflects nature. Every moment of the game is soaked in a void of human-centric game design, in spite of the setting being the ruins of a once deeply advanced civilization. This environment could and does function entirely without you, both in story and in gameplay, and it has no specific need for you to ever be here. Your goal in Rain World is to escape, not to conquer, and this world will not care if you make it there or not. However, there is still, importantly, a distinct objective in Rain World. It might be a little obtuse and not emphasized by the story, but you are doing something, and that motivates your actions throughout the game. In Rain World, at the very least, you have been given a mountain to climb. Zero North, Zero West is an exploration game, and that is it. It's a surrealist experience released to Steam in 2018, and one that has seemed to endure in the minds of those who played it well beyond its release. To call it a video game would maybe be controversial due to the word game being a part of the term, but I consider that more of a problem with video games as a term than anything. At its inception, video games were truly just meant as an entertainment device, and the defining factor of forms of entertainment is giving you something to do. This continues to be true for the vast majority of games, but I have often found myself fascinated and also completely repelled by games that do the exact opposite. Zero North, Zero West is a thing that could not exist in the real world, but only in the way of its environment. It uses complex, excessive, colorful, and occasionally overwhelming effects to make these places that are impossible to see outside of these little universes in our screens that we've created for ourselves. In any game, there are varying levels of linearity and non-linearity, and even further how objective-oriented a game is. Many AAA games aim to be like a playable movie, essentially using gameplay sections as interactable scenes that ultimately serve to stretch out the story and give the player something to do. The objective is not only to do whatever task is immediately in front of you, but also to reach the narrative resolution of the game. Open world games often take this formula, but then also give a gigantic world with a bunch of other things you can do at any given time, always leaving open the possibility of doing the main quest line, but allowing the player to go and entertain themselves in any other way that might strike their fancy. However, that is still almost always in the form of a task the game gives you, side quests or minigames or Easter eggs or lore hunting or grinding, things and experiences you can gain from. Zero North Zero West, in contrast, is a borderline uncomfortable game to play alone. It's a game that is not just limited, but proud of its limits. The only thing you can do is explore. There's no baubles or blurbs of text to tide you over. The soundtrack serves to further this alien feeling, being just about the furthest a video game soundtrack can be from human-centric without it being actively hostile in sound design. Many environments, in fact, look actively ugly or just borderline unbearable, like an itch you can't quite scratch, but it maintains this immersive quality anyways. It's an experience distinct in how much it limits you and how much it doesn't seem to care about holding your hand to guide your narrative journey. More accessible aimless games have started to crop up more and more recently, in the form of experiences like Monbazu and The Long Drive. You're given distinct tools by which to entertain yourself, but your hand is simultaneously not held in the slightest. In The Long Drive, you're given the task to visit your mom, a mom that distinctly does not exist. You are instead given a ludicrous amount of controls, things, and ways to interact with those things. There is technically progress in the form of driving out as far and long as you can, but the things you decide to do in this game are a notable reflection of yourself, including the act of turning the game off within 30 minutes and refunding it. There are multiple Steam discussion posts utterly baffled at the concept, genuinely confused that a game can have no actual explicit purpose, and I honestly cannot blame them. While I respect games like this and love watching people more stimulated by it than me play them, I cannot do so myself. The only things you have to do as objectives ultimately are maintaining things. You need to drink water, pee it out, fill up gas and oil, and repair and replace any problems that come your way. For some people, me included, this is unbearable as a way to entertain ourselves. However, in some regard, games like this are far more accurate to our world than most games out there. Nature, while there is change on a day-to-day, month-to-month, and year-to-year basis, exists largely in cycles. Our world, and especially entertainment, has in one way or another structured itself around building narratives, things to strive for, things to do, but nature is almost terrifyingly open. These games confront us with the uncomfortable reality that our minds have grown and developed around a place that is not the natural state of the planet, and that without guided entertainment, objectives, things you need to do, we might find ourselves without any purpose at all. Perhaps above all things that we see in the forest, the strongest impression and most common in daily life is its role as the unknown. Forests in games are constructed for many different reasons, from being cheap to being logical to nature's special properties and aesthetics. However, horror's big attraction to it is its role as the place we don't even have the illusion of control over. While far from the first, Slender the 8 Pages is one of the most iconic examples of the subgenre of forest horror. It struck in the wake of foundational YouTube horror games like Amnesia and Dead Space, games higher in budget, effort, and/or concept, but those weren't the things necessary to succeed in the Wild West of gaming YouTube. A new axis of spectacle, how the world watching someone else play a game would feel about it, and the simplicity of Slender put it on the very same level as its much more conceptual peers. While horror games and movies since their inception have always prided our most foundational anxieties, Slender the 8 Pages, despite the supernatural nature of it, is borderline primal. You are in a forest at night. Something is trying to kill you. The rest hardly needs explanation, and in fact doesn't have any. There doesn't seem to be any actual story justification for why you need to collect these 8 pages, but doing so is as nerve-wracking as those sweaty Let's Players in the corner seem to make it. In Slender the 8 Pages, you are thrust into darkness with nothing to hold on to for minutes at a time. Your flashlight feels closer to cutting through mud than illuminating the darkness, and your only oasis between the trees are things that are distinctly human. Not all things that the pages are hung on are human-made structures. There is a giant boulder, but this trend of traces of humanity being anchors in the darkness of the forest feels almost painfully on the nose. You're trapped in a dark forest, and humanity is the ticket to escape. Though in fairness, no comparison is perfect. You do get killed at the end regardless. The unknown is the most powerful tool in horror, and it's for a distinct reason. While a thing can be terrifying, there are thousands of worse things our brain can't come up with. While a thing can be defined, the curtain of darkness can instead act like a sounding board. It will reflect your own fears and anxieties, the most primal part of you summoning every worst possible scenario to prepare you for it. A frosted window can, with enough fear and anxiety, turn into any shape you could possibly imagine. Tiny Bunny is a game about the forest. The first chapter fixates not only on your arrival to the village and your fragility in the wake of nature, but also around a disappearance. A boy named Vova, age 10, has completely and utterly vanished. While the game as a whole, despite being unfinished, is amazing, there is a line of knowledge that is crossed the moment Chapter 2 begins. I find myself always returning to the starting monologue of the game. Like you heard at the start of the video, it speaks to ambiguity as a theme. The lonely house faced the forest, and the dark green thicket gazed back with its hollow eyes. Rustling, whizzing, swaying back and forth. One could come out and stand at the edge of the forest to reassure themselves. There was nobody behind the crooked trees. Fuzzy silhouettes swaying and the wind couldn't possibly do any harm. It's just a play of light and shadow. Just a play. At the end of it, the frost in the window turns into the outline of a fox, something that happens again just a few scenes into the story. The start of Tiny Bunny is borderline ethereal. Like yourself, Anton and his family have just moved into the cabin, and its isolation serves not just the purpose of location, but narrative too. Your perspective almost never changes in Tiny Bunny. Anton is your set of eyes and ears, and even further, you see his delusions, or rather, things that seem like delusions. The vast majority of Chapter 1 takes place through walls, screens, windows, and nightmares. Senses are limited in a way that always seems to give room to what something might be. These creatures haunting you appear only in silhouettes and outlines, and the reason for their actions are equally ambiguous. The fox, as a metaphor, speaks to the curtain of the unknown better than almost any other that I've seen. The frost in the window obscures the view of the forest. It serves as a filter, obscuring vision and giving whoever's looking through the ability to fill in those gaps. In the story, Anton sees the outline in the window, while Oya, his sister, does not. Oya, instead, is haunted by visions much scarier, an owl that stalks her window every night. Not even Anton is able to see it. We're only granted the privilege ourselves through a presumed dramatization of the event. It's important to note that while it is vague, they give these creatures form. They are distinct animals cast as a shadow without an object. They feel not like actual beings, but rather the negative space of reality, the manifestations of the overactive mind of these children. The game is curiously fixated on folklore, on mysticism, on some karma of your character. These ghosts of nature haunting Anton and Oya, these agents of the forest reaching out where they normally watch from the shadows. What about them? What about this family could possibly warrant such a thing? What must have happened to take that uncaring curtain of the forest and make it stare right at you? Some of these questions get answered, but Chapter 2 of the game breaks from the isolated bubble of the cabin. Anton's first day of school arrives, and he needs to walk there before the sun manages to even break the sky. And on the way to meet his fate, those horrible kids and adults, the ones destined to torture him for however long he's trapped in this horrible town, he meets the fox. Her name is Elisa. This shadowy outline is given a distinct form, a name. Suddenly, that metaphor of ambiguity becomes foreshadowing, the outline not signaling the patterns of Anton's paranoia, but a warning, a harbinger. All of Chapter 1 and its mystery is recontextualized, the forms of those creatures seeming terrifying until the human society Anton lives in tips the scale to become worse than the forest, and with that, making these shadows seem friendly. It turns from a cabin surrounded by trees to a story of choosing escapism or reality, facing what you have to or running off into the trees. These living, breathing, thinking creatures have a plan for you, and there is some distinct tragedy in that realization. The narrative pain of a mystery story is that it is expected to eventually result in answers. Even then, however, this is an entirely different mystery given to us. And with it, the horror present in the game almost entirely disappears. The scares, while they continue to exist, hardly ever come from the animals again. The known, rather than the unknown, becomes the oppressive, miserable weight, as the animals try to lead Anton off to a place he might never come back from. Video games and stories, as a result of not being our world, comes with advantages and drawbacks. While Slender the 8 pages captures that primal feeling of terror, once we see both Slender and a few of the 8 pages, our brain can start to piece together the unfortunate truth that there is a limited amount of things this darkness is actually hiding. We are always at least partially aware that this is not reality no matter how immersed we are, and also that video games are limited. And so, that dark curtain of the forest, that thing that reflects our own mind back at us, is a fuse that starts burning the moment we hit play. The shapes we see are overridden by ones the creator did when they made this place, and once we understand why a fox appeared in the window, the infinite possibilities of what's beyond the frost turns into exactly one. While I've said this multiple times, it is again important to note that these are video games that aren't fully fun. In a world of entertainment and a society centered around us, a constant reinforcement of the greatness and importance of humanity, games like this choose to go against it. The sky we all reach towards is obstructed by treetops, the lights we build around us cut off by 1,000 trunks sprouting out from the ground. They remove thousands of years of structures and ideas and concepts and make the only things relevant the immediate and the material. However, like nature itself, we slowly learn to conquer them. We fill the cracks in our knowledge, adapt to the ultimately simple rules, and walk calmly out of the tree line back to our world, back to safety. So then, what if there was a forest horror game that instead gave us all the freedom we could ever want? Horror games have a weird relationship with linearity for a few reasons, but in my opinion, it's largely just due to momentum. Similar to how many AAA games resemble an action movie you can play, it feels like a lot of horror games try to be the exact same thing. Rather than embracing the game aspect of a horror game, many, from indie to major releases, are closer to an interactive story. Voices of the Void is a sandbox horror game. Its promo material has you looking up towards the night sky, scanning for signals from mysterious sources all across the galaxy and recording it. The gameplay would deceptively make you think it's about the same thing, but while you can see the sky in almost every moment of the game, that magic to its darkness is not stopped by the tree line. Thematically, in Voices of the Void, there is no real difference between out there and here. Space and the forest are connected, and the trees immediately around you host things just as alien as the aliens themselves. As I explained, the core gameplay of Voices of the Void technically takes place in a small circular table of terminals. The loose story you've been given is being that of an intern, one told to scan for mysterious signals in space and record the data that the satellites pick up. This takes place entirely at your desk, using a simple but also weirdly unintuitive process of scanning, tuning, recording, and refining. Once you've scanned enough tapes, you can ship them off and get points in return, something that lets you both upgrade and quicken the process of scanning, tuning, recording, refining, and importantly, repairing. After a long enough time spent working, the servers, and more importantly, the satellites can break down. The servers are in a room right next to you, but the satellites, well, they're in the forest. And in order to repair them, you need to leave the room. When you first start the game, you actually start at the edge of the map, or at least the intended edge, in the middle of the night. Informational notes pop up, but they all importantly pertain only to settings and controls. You are given no actual instructions and are instead guided towards your station through environment alone, a path leading down the hill to a rundown hunk of concrete and windows. When inside, you still are not given any instruction. The terminal is presented to you just by exploring the station, and it's clear that this is the main room, but the pure amount of things you're exposed to make it borderline indecipherable. There is a tutorial though, one that does actually show you the primary mechanics of the game, and in the process also shows more insight into Voices of the Void's philosophy. Even ignoring the puzzle contained within it, the tutorial makes several artistic choices that speak to the game as a whole. To borrow a framework from mollystars' exhaustive analysis of Deltarune, which I recommend checking out after this video, we can view Voices of the Void as a box within a box. The game we normally engage with, the thing we normally call Voices of the Void, is surrounded by a program layer. Menus, UI, tooltips, everything explicitly designed as a way for us players to filter, navigate, and connect to the world of this game. Essentially every game in existence has this meta layer, but its role in almost all of them is in service to us. If we view the screen as a fourth wall, the meta layer is almost a part of that wall, moving decals stuck to it like a lens for us to get the information we need, but naturally implied to only be present for us. In a way, that filter gives us safety. It's an extra reminder of how not real the world we're engaging with is, and our role as the player being separate from the thing we're controlling. It even gives a safety blanket at times, with pausing or quitting or saving letting us feel assured that our mistakes or fears can be undone and disabled. Similarly, game tutorials exist on this meta layer. Even in games that try to integrate it into their story, there's a direct connection made between the game and you, a sort of undoing of the uniform the game puts on, and putting functionality above immersion for the sake of the rest of the game being easier to understand. For a game that seems to revel in aimlessness, the tutorial is actually very informative. When it comes to controls, the core gameplay loop, everything you need to actually engage with the world, it presents it exhaustively and unabashedly. But it's just so weird about it. When I say that it explains the core gameplay loop, I mean only the core gameplay loop. It feels almost like the game is explaining itself to you at gunpoint, only providing just enough information as to not get killed. You are expected to engage with the tutorial on a meta level, speaking to you as the player and not a character in the universe. But there is a world present here and not one that's entirely functional. These tooltips near the normal end of the tutorial get weirdly personal. They're never outright disturbing, but the formality and functional nature is dropped in lieu of just giving you instructions. One tooltip is uncomfortably close to the ceiling in a spot you wouldn't think yourself able to get to, and at the very end of the tutorial, something odd happens. There's one final normal tooltip telling you that there's much more to explore and to jump down the hole to end the tutorial, a stylish flare to wrap up the experience and a pretty bow, but when you jump down, it just tells you to quit. This is the only method to leave the tutorial as of now, to navigate to the menu and leave, something it could have done for you but chooses not to. Fourth wall breaks in most games are a gimmick, even in very meta ones. Speaking to you, the player, is done as a temporary measure, a way to surprise you and break immersion. Voices of the Void does all of this focus on the meta layer for one very specific reason, to make it as much a part of the game world as everything else. It has no interest in immersing you, or rather, it understands that it doesn't need to resemble reality to do so. Voices of the Void is a video game, and unlike many cinematic horror projects, it wants to be seen that way. The developer, Mr. Dr. Nose, went to great lengths to make the game resemble the function and sound of the source engine. In fact, it feels like he took sounds directly from it for collisions, jumps, button presses, and more. Sandbox games that give you all the power like Garry's Mod tend to be meta by nature. They're rested specifically within creation, essentially giving you your own deeply limited and abstracted version of a game engine and tools to mess around with inside of it. Voices of the Void is a sandbox still. You are given the ability to buy and find items and toys. Random useless objects are given exclusively for the sake of entertainment, but you are anything from the being in control of this world. Whoever controls it is also not from this world, and this serves to make it so that the meta layer is the thing this game is being played on. You are not safe within the menus of the game, and to whoever is in charge, you are their form of entertainment, their experiment. Glitches, exploits, and bugs are as natural a part of the environment as the monsters, and intentionally so. It is deeply difficult to tell what is meant to be part of the game and what is a genuine error at times, with things like a slowly moving black box and a shadowy mannequin that keeps chasing you even when paused just being spotted like Bigfoot. Your ability to sleep or save will be entirely disabled during some nights, removing your ability to find any solace in that ability to repeat if you make a mistake. Everything in this game, from the meta to the not, is designed to make you as uncertain about anything as possible. Indie horror has a weird power that comes with it, sourced from the same place that games like Rainworld do. Blockbuster projects in every genre and medium follow notable and repeatable patterns. Horror is often known for the setup, misdirect, and scare, and games like Outlast or Resident Evil 7 follow it strongly. In their efforts to be legitimate horror, they abide by the principles of those set before them. Indie horror games have no obligation to be predictable. They can be and often are very rough around the edges, can explore absurd concepts or ideas, be disconnected in story, be unsatisfying in its conclusion, and then just end. In those moments of being in those worlds though, the one thing you can be sure of is that you're not sure what is going to happen. Voices of the Void's solution to the waning unknown is to ruin your ability to know. Its horror does not at all lie just in the meta aspects. In fact, the role that UI tends to have in most games is reversed here. Voices of the Void does feed you information, and in fact a lot of it. Your terminal is sat right next to a window the size of an entire wall, one that cannot break and allows you to see far and wide outside of your room. There's a radar scanner that is constantly pinging to check if there are entities around you too, granting you excess time to prepare for anything coming your way. Except neither of those things help you in the slightest. In a game where you have the capability to fight back or avoid, maybe these would be helpful, but all it does is give you enough information to scare yourself to death. The window showing out of your room doesn't even quite have 180-degree vision horizontally or vertically. If you were to hear something outside of your station and you cannot see it out the window, that doesn't mean you're fine. It means that it might be on the opposite side or that whatever it is might be in the station with you. Your radar might help, except for the unfortunate detail that it only scans if something is there, not what it is. In a game like Slender or Five Nights at Freddy's, this would be genuinely helpful, but I could not list a video game with more varied entities in existence than this one. To properly spoil this game would take hours. The amount of events and entities, hostile or otherwise, are in the hundreds. The scale of it lies not in its area, not in its gameplay, but in its possibilities, and it exploits it as much as it possibly can. While humanity can suck the mystery out of a forest, individual people cannot. To make a forest in a game world that has the creatures we know, animals on planet Earth would miss the point of emulating nature. We've been spoiled on as many life forms as our society can possibly muster. To truly represent what the forest was for hundreds of thousands of years to humanity, it must be made completely alien. It's the most brilliant use of the new freedom of games that I've ever seen, the ability to skirt and outright break traditional game design for the purpose of sending the message it wants to send. It weaponizes aimlessness, takes away the safety of the meta, turning things that would break immersion into part of the experience, swallowing you in an ocean of uncertainty, of overwhelming controls, of options and information that you are eternally convinced you have no idea what is going to happen next. And all of this is done to consume you in this unrelenting feeling that you are not built for this place. You and your human understanding, what you've been taught about nature and what you've learned about video games means nothing here. That this is an experience you cannot conquer, that there will be things here you will truly never come to understand. The line of nature doesn't end where the trees do. It rises up above into the night sky, into your station, into your menus, into your room, and into your mind. Nature is not just a place, it's a feeling, a philosophy, a concept, and it's one that this game understands more than any other I've ever seen. In all of my search for games that reflect this feeling that I chase, the dark, untailored, aimless monolith of the forest, there are none that embody its spirit better than Voices of the Void. In what feels like an increasingly solved world, people seem to find themselves wanting for mystery. Video games hold a special place as a medium because of their ability to create new worlds with new rules, and in that sense, recreate things that have been entirely lost to us. So many games try their best to capture some fundamental feeling, one of childhood curiosity or of crowning achievement or of awe-inspiring spectacle. They're dramatizations, ghosts colored by memories and formed into a place, a new one untouched by the blights of reality. Each game is its own forest, even the ones made to be as smooth an experience as possible. For me, though, these games, the rough and difficult, are the ones that draw me in. If you look at my videos, you'll find that these qualities, a lack of tailoring and obfuscation of objective, twists and turns, the yawning unknown, litter the games I cover. They provide a safe way to engage with a void we all find ourselves drawn to, a frustrating and bloody and terrifying place, but one that, for one reason or another, feels like some sort of home to us. I'm not one to believe that nature is fully built into our brains, at least not as much as others seem to, but there is a need within us that it seems like only nature can really satiate. The best nap I ever had was when I went to a ranch. The tree line was close to the small house I was in, surrounded otherwise by acres of plains. The windows looked in towards me, a clear line of sight from the couch to the tree line. That black curtain of the forest was right in front of me, and I felt some perfect security in that, one just as warm as the blanket I had on me and twice as heavy. I didn't abandon my life in society. I didn't move to the countryside and forage for berries. I went home at the end of the day to my family's house in the suburbs. When I got home that night, I played Minecraft for the first time in months. It helped. Thank you all for watching the video. This one took a very long time to make, to the point where I had to take a break day just before it released because I was just not feeling good. This is said break day. Hello, it's me from before I have to edit the rest of the video. I feel very good about the script, and I got an illustrated commissioned thumbnail to see how that would work out, and it all felt like it came together quite well, especially with Voices of the Void being the climax of the video, right? Anyways, I hope it translated enough to where you don't need me to explain that. If you enjoyed the video and would like to participate in my community further, I do have a Discord server. I also, importantly, have a Patreon. This Patreon is purely voluntary. It does not come with any specifically special perks besides a role in my Discord server, but it would be hugely beneficial to me because I just moved out and I kind of need the money to pay my bills. The good part about making video essays is that you can really be passionate about what you do, but the bad part is that you upload one video like once every 1 or 2 months. Compared to somebody who's getting like 400,000 views every single time they release a video once a day, I am not getting nearly as much as you might think I am. Anyways, it pays out monthly and any dollar counts. The lowest tier is $2 and that is more than generous enough. And don't feel any pressure, I will be fine, truly. Anyways, the second perk for the higher tier patrons is me speaking their name out loud at the end of videos, so I will do that now. Special Patreon shoutouts to Anon, David Keel, House B, Jared Chode, Runa, Walls de Morinville, Zimborg, Dankly Voidly, Days, Edmund Dong, Ignatius Stormblessed, MF Bitchboy, Snow Peach, Wayne Wheeler, Ace Vanguard, Beagle, Bestest Patron, Celestial Tangle, Christian Cook, Connor, Deference, Fake Milk, Florian, Gerberil, Imperator Odenathus, Jacob Falk, Jocelyn, Judge, do you enjoy making this video? Yes, actually. Latang Osoya, Maiden Batter, Owen, Peter Healy, Ro Ramden, Robin Michael Becker, Ruby Shoebring, Sambro99, Shunks, Sinex Dosis Admin, Soul of Phi Heart, Ted H, Tim the Cringe, Zongheng Zhao, and that's it. Oh wait, Undersea Rex EVT canceled, oh no. Undersea Rex EVT has been like the final one forever, and it's a bit of a shame, but that's okay. That all being said, thank you to everyone who has subscribed to my Patreon, everyone who has subscribed, or even if you've just watched up until this point, it means a lot. And with all my begging done, thank you and have a nice day.